So again, you have a pretty big palette here of places to look for. Don't limit yourself in terms of what that might be. So we heard about one success story in partnering with a local elected official to do an event. And the benefit there was the elected official's team, shockingly, tried to drag cameras along with them. And that worked. Are there other examples where people have had success in getting a good story placed or a piece of news that you found helpful? And is there anything that you've learned?
When I spoke before City Council on local needs, that they're full of reporters because they cover every City Council meeting and got contacted by reporters to follow up on human interest stories that they thought were interesting to them. It worked great.
Great. Did everybody hear that? Anybody else have anything they want to share?
One topic is that the mindset where you're imposing on a reporter now is wrong if you've got something important to say, because as you mentioned, all the publications are cutting back. So a reporter lives and dies on the amount of content that they have published, either online, offline, or both. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, as you said correctly, know what it is that their particular specialty is, and then realize that you have a potential partner there if you're feeding publishable information. And because they've got to publish or they're going to get a pink slip.
Right. Yep. Father?
Because I can speak, I'm trying to do shorter sermons these days. With that's a pray for me. With the week to Christmas food distribution that Stacy talked about, when they contacted us, the key response was, "Let's talk." We sit down around rather than some remote exercise to get it done. So that's the key partnership you mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. relationship. And it was intentional to invite them to our space, to the church. The other key piece was with the publicity thing, for them to do the initial publicity, but give us more information. And when it came to the TV stations, I purposefully asked for the contacts that they have, that the legislators had made, and followed up with a telephone call to each. And the last quick piece was when the TV stations turned up that day, can I just put this bluntly?
Please do.
We took charge of the interviews.
And in what way? When you say that we took charge, what does that mean to you? How did that happen?
It's called guerrilla warfare. And
I say that out of all due respect, because if there's any group that are control freaks, it is the political messaging media teams.
I see the smile on your face, and that's true. We had put together a team. And so we had persons on the lookout for the arrival of the politicians that we went out to meet. We were on the lookout for the media, and when they arrived, we went out to meet. And then communicated with both the politicians and the media to come together for the interviews. And on top of that, as director, quite frankly, let me use the language bluntly, I took charge of the interviews, mm-hmm. and it worked. So it was not just looking for votes, it was a real partnership as best as possible. Okay, I did lie. The last thing, checked the one particular television station website after they posted the report. And of course there's that comment section. One comment was, you hypocrites, meaning Holy Family Church. Don't you know that there are those who would want to have this during the course of the year? And the lesson was, look out for the negative reaction. It's not just all positive. Be prepared for.
And if I could ask a follow-up question, when you saw that comment, did you post a...
Yes, I did.
And what was your approach to answering that?
My holy thought, since it was approaching Christmas, was thank you. But this is a demonstration of love, and yes, we invite you to come participate. But I wanted to say, get out of the dark, show your face, let's move ahead together.
Thank you.
So it was an offering, an engagement to go forward.
Great, thank you. You got a question or a comment or idea?
Father, I just want to ask a question to you, kind of follow up. You mentioned several times you took charge. How you took charge? What?
You dominated.
I mean, if you can be brief on that, I guess, just to give us an idea.
More specific.
Yeah, more specific.
Well, first of all, I have a relationship with the two legislators. Having cultivated the relationships before. So when they arrived, I simply presented the hope to do. And guess what? They said, yes, Father Ward, yes, we'll work with you. So it was deliberate. We got to it.
And we invite you to watch the video. It was very good.
And send $5.
Father Wood is not telling the whole story. What he did was, when the politicians came, he locked them in a closet. Then he had the interviews, then he let them out of the closet, and that's how you did it. Brilliant. It was brilliant.
I'll add to that. I live in a little, like a bedroom community. It's a little green city, Miami Springs. And so that's an advantage. Of course, there's disadvantages, but the advantage is that there's a local paper, and everybody practically reads that paper in the Springs. And because we have an ecumenical group of churches, we get along. We share worship space, we share service space, at recovery group, we share with the Miami Rescue Mission, whatever. And so we've been in the paper a lot. And actually, that's my end of it. It's very simple to do. You know, you shoot and it's free. And they come out to our church, like if there's a blessing of couples, if there's St. Francis Days, or, you know, there's not a lot happening. I mean, there is a fair amount, but if you put it out there like 3 weeks early, it's going to make it at least 1 week in the paper. And one thing I wanted to add to your experiences, well, we've done Holy Week and Advent Week, but more recently with the Pastors Forum I'm speaking of, with the churches, we had piggybacked onto the city's Christmas at the Gazebo program. And that was great. We had 5, bands on board and all, and some pastors on the stage. But one of the pastors didn't know he was going to, kind of went into an altar call. Said, meet me over there if you want to pray. And oh, well, I got tapped on the shoulder, because I was a coordinator, about the separation of church and state. And so, that came up. And maybe you could address that. We're talking about politics versus religion. And
well, I don't know that there's a direct answer to that. I think it probably is more related to time and place and function, but certainly from the standpoint of talking about it from a press standpoint, it's hard to separate the two in my mind in many ways in terms of what we do. And I probably am not answering your question directly there, but I don't know that it is in terms of creating communications and things like that, our place or need to separate them. I think it's more in the matter of the press have to do that for us. So the extent is, at the end of the day, we're still true to our calling, and we're putting the calling in the context of the work we're doing in the community. And if there is a filter that needs to be placed on top of that, well then, let's deal with that when we get there. But I don't want to filter ourselves before we get there. If there's a physical location where we have some things, then let's, I guess, ask the right questions and identify that up front, but not in terms of our core communication.
I just wanted to share a story that happened down here. It was not an Episcopal church, but it rings in my mind. One church had a drive-by prayer day, and it was played on all of the local channels. So obviously they came up with a creative idea to get their church publicized. And I think that we should learn to figure out some things like that, where they just had people drive in, get a prayer, and drive out, and it kind of
I think the Roots of Ashes to Go is an example too, where there was something that was very tradition that has now generated, I think even last year there was television coverage of some of the Ashes to Go programs in Chicago and some of the elevated platforms, for example. And we'll touch on that in terms of, and here too. So, but
at the train stations.
So different or unexpected, or and that's such a great example of being in unexpected places. And we'll show a few of those when we talk about completing our plans this afternoon as well. But keep that thought, because we're talking about publicity, we're talking about engaging people in new ways, and simple ideas sometimes are always the most powerful and effective because they don't cost a lot and don't take a lot of resources. All right, in your packets, we're going to do another kind of very short exercise here. I'm going to have you sharpen your pencils again. But there is something that says, just get started, media relations. So for the 5 or 6 of you who do this regularly, this will be very easy to do. For the others of you, you may take a minute or two more, and there's no right answer here. Just get started, media releases. Has everybody found it? And this will be a little more post-workshop reading, but there's some really good how-to tips in here that Neva Ray and the Office of Communication has put together, and these are also available at episcopalchurch.org for you. But I just wanted to look at the very top of writing the media release. And there are some basic things, and I think this also translates to an email, because think of the headline as the subject line. Think of the first paragraph in the email as the first paragraph of your release in that kind of context. And so there are just a couple of things that I think are important to do, and you'll see there are some tips at the top. At the bottom it says, here's a template. So it gives you a very basic form and structure if you've never done one before, to be able to do that, where it says date, the type of release that you're issuing, and then some very basic information for immediate release. And the date means this is available for you to use right now. Some contact information, and then some basic copy. So what I'd like you to do, and again, this is something that I'd like you to kind of read through and keep, because the first time you're ready to write that release, pull this out and look at it. It will really help walk you through that process of writing a full release and being comfortable that when you submit something, it will be viewed as professional and viewed as something that should be considered. Okay, it'll give you that confidence, and I heard that in some of the survey questions. I'm not sure what I should do, or I'm afraid to send something. This is a very simple approach to give you confidence that whatever you can submit would be received well. But at the very top, I would like you to do 2 things. One is, I'd like you to write a short headline about an upcoming thing that you're doing. Could be an event, it could be a program, it could be a fundraiser, it could be a visit somewhere. I don't know what it is. But think about something that may be coming up this year in your ministry. And I'd like you to write a short headline, no more than 5, 6, 7, 8 words, that describes what that is. Holy Family to host first ever something. But think about that. I'd like you to write a short headline. Think of first an event or a program that's coming up in your ministry or in your parish, in your congregation, and write a headline. And then I'd just like you to write 2 sentences that begin to describe what it is. So a headline, and then 1 or 2 sentences to describe what it is. Again, we're not looking for art at this point. We're just looking to get into a little bit of a routine to begin to describe our activities. And we're going to read a few of these together, not to critique them, but to begin to get an understanding of how this might flow together for us. There are no wrong answers. I love it. The pens are flying. All right, just 2 sentences, not the whole press release. It's hard, isn't it? Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to edit yourself and to really focus on what's most important here. This is the think time because it's the most important part of what you're going to be writing. Whether it's that email pitch note or this release, this is all the editor is going to look at before they probably make a decision on if they're going to keep reading or they're going to stop, and hope you don't call them. Just kidding.
You mentioned editing. I find that if I write something, I must put it aside for perhaps a day or even 2. Might look at it in the meantime, but I always am tweaking, shortening, putting in better information. The first time, even though the idea is there, it's not concise enough to send out or to, even in year-end reports, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
I appreciate you mentioning that. I think that's a really excellent suggestion.
So nothing can be last minute. That's
Nothing-
basically what I'm saying.
Things too often are. Who was it? I forget who said this, and somebody here will tell me because I not only have botched what I'm sharing with you, but also I can't recall who said it. But basically the idea was it takes me something like an hour to prepare for a 4-hour meeting. But it takes me 4 hours to prepare for a 1-hour meeting. And it's that same idea. It's that notion of the less we're constricted, the more thought and preparation it takes to do it with excellence. And I think this economy of words is really a lot of what good publicity is about. Because so much gets packed into thinking about who's reading this, why do they care, what am I telling them that connects with them in a way that's meaningful? And gosh, this is the hardest part, going back to our audience and our message and our goals. Are we accomplishing those things in what we just wrote? We've packed a lot into 3 sentences, haven't we?
Is it necessary to send a formal press release, or is it acceptable to, if you spent some time creating an advertisement that has all the information and a picture, can you just send that instead, or do you still need to take the steps and write a formal?
I'll kind of differentiate between a couple of things here. One is, the question again is, do you have to send a formal press release every time? And the answer is, I'd say, is no. The benefit of a, quote, press release is that it's a discipline to follow that an editor may be used to seeing and reading. There are a lot of versions of that, though. One might be simply an email to an editor that accomplishes the same thing and gives them 3 tight paragraphs on who you are, what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and where you're doing it. So you've answered those questions in 3 or 4 paragraphs in a very short news release and or short email, and don't have to attach anything to that. The benefit is that you can often take the guts of a press release and post it on your website, so it's a more formal communication that you can use in a lot of other ways there. In terms of, quote, sending just a flyer or an ad, I really encourage you not to do that, because no matter how those are done, my opinion is they tend to be perceived as simply more commercial and not as thoughtful. And again, if the editor, we heard some examples that this is a very close community. We have a lot of things, and that may all it be is a shorthand written note to the editor with a flyer attached, but that's based on a deep relationship with the editor. They know where you're coming from, etc. But I tend not to do just that, because that's a, remember, the goal is make it easy for them. You've not made it easy for them. You've told them what's going on, but they still have to do the work. Is anyone interested in sharing an example of what you've written? And again, what I'm looking for here in this exercise is simply a way to begin to express your news about what's coming up. And I just want to share a few of these ideas around the group, only for context. Then we're going to talk about a few other forms. Okay.
The headline is Bishop coming to Incarnation Church. And the 2 sentences are, the Right Reverend Leo Friday is to visit the Church of the Incarnation for confirmation. A large class is to be presented at the 9 a.m. service on April 23rd.
Great. So I heard a lot in a very short, I mean, you've told me the story. I have almost everything I need to know there. And, you know, I appreciate you sharing that. That was a great way to start, because I heard who, what, when, where, why. All in 20 words, maybe? 25 words? So it's a great example, again, I think, of a goal, and I would suspect your goal in sending that release out would be to 34 words, increase attendance at the services, to draw attention to the fact the bishop is coming, which is news in many, many communities, etc. Another example?
St. Mary Magdalene walks in beauty in the Navajo Nation is the headline.
St. Mary Magdalene walks
in beauty. For the 13th year, parishioners of St. Mary Magdalene Episcopal Church will travel to the Utah portion of the Navajo Nation to conduct an art, music, and dance camp. Just one sentence, sorry.
Right. And the phrase walks in beauty refers to?
That's the Navajo experience of and philosophy. So that would be in quotation marks.
Wonderful. Any thoughts or comments about that when you heard that? What did it evoke? Images?
Yeah, images. Walk in beauty. Looked like an image, but I didn't see.
Made you want to,
yeah,
right, I mean, so you wanted to see the image.
Yeah, I wanted to
I
see
think
the
that's a
image.
really important thing. It piqued your interest, right?
Interest, yeah.
I thought that was a wonderful use of the expression in this context as well.
I was a little bewildered because I didn't quite understand walk in beauty.
Then you read the rest of the article.
Yeah, that's to get you to read the second paragraph.
Right.
After you say this is what we're doing, then you, oh.
I think what you're saying, and I would agree, it was very important to saying, oh, okay, I'm interested, walks with beauty, and I asked that question, are we answering that question right away, right up front? Am I going to now be able to picture what that means? Okay? So what you're also raising is, let's make sure when we're using language and phrases that they're understandable and we're not using colloquialisms or context that people may not understand. So again, check yourselves there, right?
I'll keep it in this corner. Second annual Fish Fry Frenzy. St. James the Fisherman to host its second annual Fish Fry fundraiser, Bayside, at the famous Caribbean Club, mile marker 104.
Okay, what took that headline from being to ah?
Frenzy.
Frenzy.
I like that.
So should we call the burn unit down there, or what?
We'll speak about that later in the audit. That's right.
I want to know why is it a frenzy then?
Okay. Why is it a frenzy?
Fish on steroids.
Come and see.
I think that that's a good point, though, is that you would go on. So right away I know, okay, this is happening. Frenzy's interesting. We need to deliver on that. So if we call the press down there and they don't see this special thing going on, we want to make that connection there. I love the word. Let's make sure we pay it off, right?
The only change I might make to that headline is feeding frenzy at local church.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Fundraiser. Don't tell them it's a fundraiser.
In the lead.
Yeah.
Okay. So don't tell them it's a fundraiser because the fish fry is going to raise money for. Okay. And you don't like it because. So it feels like you're being asked for something as opposed to an opportunity.
This is that phone call you get in your house. Great dining event opportunity. You know, you're giving people an alternative way to spend their money. You want that share of wallet that they normally spend anyway.
You know, we are having a good debate and discussion between the notion of do we include something like fundraiser or not at the beginning. You know, and again, I think to some extent it's somewhat subjective. What we do know is people don't just like to be necessarily asked for money. On the other hand, we also know that people like to do things where they feel their time and efforts benefit a cause. So I think you have to kind of know your audience and know the precedent there. It doesn't strike me as something that's necessarily a negative there. I do like to know that it's going to benefit or help someone if I'm participating in some way. It's probably implied in this case too, but. Rosemary?
Years ago, our ECW, we've always had 4 book reviews. We only have 3 now. And the Sun Sentinel would advertise it. I would send all 4 in before January 1, and they apparently put them in a compartment so when the date is right, then they advertise. And it would always have to be brief. This is how brief they are. I'm going to read. This is an original one. You're all invited to attend this. This is a good time for me to advertise this. All Saints ECW, an evening with ECW, including 4 original skits. A catered dinner, February 21 at 6:30 p.m. Reservations, please, and the telephone number, 954-537-1032. That was what they would print. They haven't done it. I don't know what our marketing department's doing, but we need press. And I hope that you all will come to this.
That's the way to use the microphone, Rosemary. Thank you. I'd like to take one more. Go ahead. Yep.
It's interesting to me how we impose our own experiences on what we're reading, because when you read the Feeding Frenzy, I went to when I used to fly a lot with JetBlue and get stuck in the airport, and then like after 6 hours they'd bring a pizza and people would rush and like push each other out of the way because you think they'd never eat again. And that's what I thought of this frenzy of like, out of the way, I want my my slice of fish. So I just thought it was interesting. I think that's what we do. We kind of bring our own memories or senses of what the meaning is.
That's right. Yeah, and we heard that I think also with this notion of fundraiser, something which is either a positive, I know where the funds are going to go, I think that's a good thing, or I want to know more about the quality of the fish than I do about the fact my money's going to go somewhere. So again, those are important considerations there, but thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. It's a great example, especially connected to JetBlue and Frenzy.